Namaste, greetings to all. Today we are going to discuss about the happenings of COP15 that happened recently in Montreal. We have with us Secretary, National Biodiversity Authority, to share his valuable inputs and learnings that happened during the COP15. Namaste, sir. Welcome to this interview. We know that you've attended the full session of the COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity in Montreal recently. We would like to know your first thoughts on the COP15 that happened at Montreal.
Thank you, Divya. Thank you to all the viewers who are seeing this interview. COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity, as you know, took place between 7th to 19th of December of 2022. It was a landmark event. I was very fortunate to attend the entire session of the Conference of Parties at Montreal. I thank our ministry, our Honorable Minister, our Secretary, Shrimati Leena Nanton Madam, and also our Additional Secretary, Shri for deputing me as part of the Indian delegation to the Conference of Parties. This COP was actually different compared to the other COPs because a lot of decisions for biodiversity conservation in different parts of the world were decided during this conference. The presidency of this COP15 was held by China, and part of the COP15 was held in Kunming, and the second half of the COP was held at Montreal. A lot of landmark decisions were taken during this conference that would go a long way for biodiversity conservation on Mother Earth.
Yes, thank you for that. So before going into the major outcomes of the COP15 of the convention, we would like to know what is a convention in the first place.
See, the United Nations was constituted after the World War II. After that, several UN bodies were established. Mm-hmm. So, like we have UNESCO, UNICEF, UN Habitat, UN OPS, like that several UN agencies are there. Within the UN agency, they establish conventions with a specific objective. Say for example, the Ramsar Convention was established in 1971 under the UNESCO. And when 1972 the Stockholm Conference happened, as part of the outcome of that conference, the UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, was established with the mandate that all the environment related matters would be covered by the UNEP. Under the UNEP there are several conventions. Countries who want to be party to this convention can associate themselves and sign an agreement. India is party to almost all the conventions of the UNEP. Under the United Nations Environment Program, we have the Convention on Migratory Species, which is functioning from Bonn. We have the CITES, Convention on International Treaty for Endangered Species of Plants and Animals, which is functioning from Geneva. In 1992, when the Earth Summit happened in Rio, Brazil, three major conventions under the UNEP were established. One was the UN Convention to combat desertification, with the idea to bring back unproductive lands, desertified lands, back to productive ecosystems. This office is functioning in Bonn. There are 197 countries who are members to this convention. We also have the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, again functioning from Bonn. There are 198 countries associated with this convention. And then the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, which is established at Montreal. In fact, all the three conventions are linked if you take the objectives, because the idea is to bring back unproductive areas or ecosystems back to productive lands and then conserve the biodiversity in these areas. That would go a long way to mitigate climate change. So all these three conventions are interlinked. So convention per se is an institution set up under a UN system, UN agency, with a specific mandate and objective countries who want to fulfill that objectives become parties to this convention.
Okay, okay. That makes it clear for us, sir. So how do conventions operate? You know, how are decisions taken at the COP to make it operational?
Okay. Since we are discussing about COP15, we will focus on the Convention on Biological Diversity. Every convention has their own mechanism to convene their conference of parties. Like climate change conference, COP happens once in a year. Ramsar convention happens once in 3 years.
Yeah.
The CBD convention is a convention that happens once in 2 years. So during this period, there is already a secretariat for every convention. So CBD convention is set up at Montreal. We have a secretary, executive secretary, and then there is a presidency. One country holds the presidency of that COP for 2 years.
Okay.
So the COP15 presidency is being held by China. In fact, COP11 was held by India. In fact, that COP we had it in Hyderabad in 2012.
Yes.
Now COP15 is presidency is held by China. So ahead of the conference of parties, lot of meetings happen to decide on what decisions have to be taken by the convention during the next conference of parties. So basically the secretariat of the convention decides on what are the areas to be decided for fulfilling the objectives of the convention in the next conference of parties. So an expert group is normally constituted, and then they come up with the various subjects to be discussed and decided. And then these subjects are referred to working groups, ad hoc working groups. That happens over a period of 2 years ahead of the COP, ahead of the conference of parties. And countries who have associated themselves to that convention attend these working groups and express their views. So finally they come up with the draft decisions of the working group. Once the zero draft is prepared, then it gets updated into an updated zero draft, then it becomes a first draft.
Okay.
So once the first draft of a particular issue is decided, this is brought into the conference of parties once in 2 years. A variety of subjects are dealt, and generally what happens is the working groups are constituted at the time of the COP, and there will be a lot of suggestions and recommendations from different countries. So these suggestions would be bracketed in a text.
Okay.
So the idea is to finalize this text and remove all the brackets with the consensus of all the countries. So if the working group can decide that, well and good. Otherwise, they refer to another group called the contact group. Contact group. So the contact group again tries to bring consensus among the different countries. If again there are no consensus, then it is referred to a Friends of Chair group. Okay. So the non-paper, which is the final text of that particular subject, is referred to the Friends of Chair group. And then once Friends of Chair group, outsiders are not allowed. Only the parties who are actually associated with the convention alone can attend the Friends of Chair group. NGOs or other representatives are not allowed. So they try to reach a consensus at the Friends of Chair group, and try to remove as many brackets as possible, bracketed text as possible. And then once this is finalized, they send the non-paper back to the contact group. And the non-paper again they will discuss, the contact group will try to further refine the draft of the text. And then once they arrive at some sort of a consensus, some minimum brackets still would be there, but they would finalize the text with minimum brackets. And then they would forward this text back to the working group. That is referred to as a CRP, conference room paper.
Okay.
Then the CRP is again discussed by the working group. In the working group, apart from the parties, other observers are also allowed to voice their views. The working group finally brings in a more consensus among the parties and finalizes the text. Once whatever they have finalized, that becomes the limited edition document, L document. And then this L document is referred to the plenary.
Okay.
So the L document still may or may not have some brackets. So the plenary is chaired by the presidency of the COP. So in COP15, the Minister of Environment from China was the president of the COP. So he would actually discuss these matters with the other parties at the plenary, and then the plenary will come to a consensus of adopting the text of the document. That becomes a binding document for the countries to fulfill the objectives or plan of action for implementing a particular program to conserve biodiversity. That is how it is adopted. So this is how the COP works, and at the end of the plenary, a number of texts would have been adopted. And that is treated as a text of that particular COP, adopted text of that COP. And for the next 2 years, the countries would be implementing the decisions of the COP. That is how it works.
That's a lot of work going behind them. It helps us in way forward.
Yes,
right?
yes.
The text.
Yes.
So since India is party to CBD, we would like to know, has India addressed conservation related issues in the country?
Yeah. So far as India is concerned, we have been an active member of the CBD since 1992. We signed the text on 22nd May 1992. That is why every year we are celebrating this International Day for Biological Diversity on that day. So since then we have been a very active member of the CBD, and even since 1972 when India became a member of the Stockholm Conference, India has taken a lot of proactive measures. We brought in constitutional amendments. We inserted a article in the form of 51G to make it a fundamental duty for all the citizens to protect our environment and all the biodiversity. Similarly, under Article 48A, which was introduced after the Stockholm Conference, it made it mandatory on the part of government to take care of the environment. Then government also enacted a lot of legislations. The Water Pollution Control Act was enacted in 1974. The Air Pollution Control Act was enacted in 1981. The Environment Protection Act was enacted in 1986. Wildlife Protection Act was enacted in 1972. These are all outcomes of the Stockholm Conference. Then 1992, when India became member of the CBD, we brought in a comprehensive law called the Biological Diversity Act in 2002, which brought in a comprehensive protection regime for our biodiversity. Today we have a large network of protected areas. Our total geographical area of our country is about 3.29 million square kilometers, out of which today we have about 24.6% under tree cover. We have a large network of reserve forests and protected forests. Today we have about 24.6 lakh square kilometers of reserve forest in our country. We have about 54 tiger reserves, 33 elephant reserves, 104 national parks. We have about 566 wildlife sanctuaries. 74 Ramsar sites have been notified. A large number of protected areas in the mangroves ecosystems, in the biodiversity rich areas have also been notified under different legislations like the Environment Protection Act, Biodiversity Act, Biological Diversity Act, and so on. So India has taken a lead so far as biodiversity conservation is concerned. We have dedicated departments to conserve our biodiversity. Line departments like Forest Department, Agriculture Department, Soil Department, Horticulture Department, Fisheries Department, Animal Husbandry Department. They are all functioning vibrantly. Besides, we are all giving a lot of importance for the research sector. The research community also plays a major role in conservation. Under the Biological Diversity Act, the government has also established a three-tier institutional mechanism. We have the National Biodiversity Authority at the national level. Every state today has a state biodiversity board. Every union territory has a union territory biodiversity council. Every local body today has a biodiversity management committee. In India today we have about 2.77 lakh biodiversity management committees in every local body with specific duties, responsibilities and functions to perform. We have now notified 17 national repositories under the Biological Diversity Act, so that the people who are using biological resources can keep a voucher specimen in these repositories, so that in case there is an extinction of a particular species, then we have a voucher specimen to ensure that these species do not get extinct. We have notified about 336 threatened species under the Biological Diversity Act, both flora and fauna, to ensure that the state biodiversity boards and the National Biodiversity Authority take due diligence while according approvals for extraction of these species. We have notified about 36 biodiversity heritage sites in 15 states. These are areas rich in biodiversity, maybe medicinal plants or birds like that, but they are outside the forest ecosystems. So a large number of areas have been brought under conservation. Ecosystem sensitive zones have been earmarked in the country under the Environment Protection Act. So about 27% of the area today in India has been brought under conservation, and India is today a leader and can be proud of its achievements.
That's very heartening to know about India's initiatives. Thank you, sir. So now coming to your personal view about the major outcomes of COP15 that you have attended recently. Can you throw some light on that?
COP15 is a landmark conference. It is equated by many on par with the Paris Agreement for the climate change COP, which happened in 2015. For the simple reason that we have brought in a comprehensive text in the form of post-2020 global biodiversity framework with 4 larger goals and 23 targets to be achieved by the countries by 2030. So, unlike the previous COPs, this COP has brought in a strategic approach for biodiversity conservation. In fact, in 2010 we had this Aichi targets for, it's also called the Strategy Plan for Biodiversity for the period 2011 to 20. At Aichi also the Conference of Parties brought in 20 targets. But the difference between this post-2020 global biodiversity framework and the Aichi targets is that in the Aichi targets, the targets were all qualitative, which cannot be measured. It was more aspirational in nature. But in this COP, they have made it more quantitative. So specific numbers have been provided in every target, so that countries can aspire to achieve those targets. So these targets are already available in the public domain. If you Google, you just find out what are these 23 targets. Comprehensively, they have covered both the aquatic and the terrestrial ecosystems. In the aquatic, again, they have focused both the ocean ecosystems as well as freshwater ecosystems. And in the terrestrial, they have comprehensively covered the forest ecosystems and the agriculture ecosystems. So every target has a specific number given, so that the countries have an idea that we have to reach that target. And the other major decision in this COP was that the COP also realized the fact that countries which are rich in biodiversity, which are generally located around the equator, between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, are also the least developed countries or developing countries. Whereas the countries who are away from the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn are economically rich countries, but having poor biodiversity. So this COP also identified the fact that a lot of resource is required for biodiversity conservation in terms of capacity building, in terms of financial resources, financial support. So the COP also took decisions for mobilizing about $200 billion for biodiversity conservation, which has to be mobilized by the developed countries for protecting our biodiversity, which are predominantly seen in least developed or developing countries. Also, another major outcome of this COP is the fact that the digital sequence information, which was a long pending demand of the developing countries, to bring that under the Nagoya Protocol, to bring that under the benefit sharing mechanism, was also agreed to in this COP under Target 3 and Goal C. So, under Target 13 and Goal C. So, under this development, what has happened is countries who are using digital sequence information technology to produce various products without physically accessing any biological resource will also have to be covered under the benefit sharing regime. So they will have to contribute benefit sharing for biodiversity conservation. So the COP decided that there should be a multilateral mechanism where this fund from the DSA technology made products would be pooled into those into this fund, from where the countries can access financial support for biodiversity conservation. So, but it is the next COP, that is the COP 16, will take a decision on how this amount will be distributed and utilized. Okay. So, in principle, they have agreed that DSA should be covered under the benefit sharing mechanism. But India has always been asking for that there should be a bilateral approach as well, because certain species are also endemic to a particular country. Say, for example, red sanders. Red sanders nowhere in the world is found except for in India, that too in a very small pocket. So, digital sequence information from red sanders and any product made from red sanders, obviously the benefit sharing should go only to India.
Yeah.
So there is no point of taking this fund to a multilateral mechanism. So we have been arguing that it should have both the aspects. So these would be discussed in the working group that would be set up in due course, exclusively to decide on the modalities of implementing the DSI technology and how it can be covered under the benefit sharing mechanism, and how that can help biodiversity conservation in developing countries. Also, another major outcome of this COP was that India became, as you know, party to the HAC, High Ambition Coalition, which was actually brought in by France and Costa Rica just 2 years back. Today there are 117 countries, and we have been also pushing that every country should bring 30% of their land or oceans under cultivation, so that globally 30% of the oceans and 30% of the land would be covered under conservation. Okay. So this was brought in as a target 3. This was agreed by the COP and brought in as target 3. And since India has already achieved 27%, the remaining 3% we have ideas to bring another 3% under conservation comfortably, through bringing in more tree cover, through community reserves, through OECMs, other effective area-based conservation measures, and also bringing more areas as biodiversity heritage sites. These are some of the broad areas where and outcomes of this COP, and also the Honorable Prime Minister's this lifestyle mission was also presented by our Honorable Union Minister during his address, and that was also accepted in the COP as one of the decisions to reduce 50% of the consumption. As you know, most of the biodiversity destruction in the world happens because of the need to produce more because of the growing population. But if the population changes their lifestyle, suiting to the environment, and if they can avoid unnecessary expenditure, unnecessary consumption, it would go a long way indirectly to protect our biodiversity. That was also adopted as one of the decisions of the COP 15 at Montreal. These are some of the major outcomes.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very elaborate, light thrown on the COP 15 major outcomes. You were mentioning about GBF, right? Biodiversity framework. Can you please elaborate a little more on that for now?
See, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is a framework that was planned 2 years back to have a comprehensive approach for biodiversity conservation. So what the COP has done is that after 2 years of deliberation, they have come up with this framework document. It's called the Kunming-Montreal Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So the idea is that by 2030, we should arrest biodiversity loss across the world. So for that, 4 goals they have outlined. The first goal aims at conserving our biodiversity. Second goal aims to sustainably use our biodiversity to avoid over-extraction, to avoid loss of biodiversity. Third goal aims at benefit sharing mechanism, to ensure that there is a fair and equitable sharing of benefits by the users with the conservers of biodiversity. And the fourth goal aims at resource mobilization, because for biodiversity conservation, finance and human resources indispensable. We need human resource as well as financial resource. So the fourth goal aims at how the resource can be mobilized, how the people can be trained, capacity building can be provided to the people, to the officials, to the various stakeholders, to the conservers who are involved in biodiversity conservation. And 23 targets have been outlined, and these targets have been brought under these 4 goals. So every target has a particular sector of biodiversity in mind, like maybe agriculture ecosystems.
Okay.
One target says that we should reduce the subsidy for providing harmful pesticides. The world wants that at least $50 billion of subsidy should be reduced by 2030. Of course, we have our own concerns on that, because India being an agriculture country, predominantly an agrarian country, 65% of our population dependent on agriculture, it can be done in phases. For us, it would be a major challenge to implement this task. But there are other tasks like bringing 30% of the land and sea under cultivation that India can comfortably achieve. Similarly, there is a task to reduce the introduction of invasive alien species. Already India has a mechanism to check introduction of invasive alien species. We have the Directorate of Plant Quarantine. So countries should strive to reduce the introduction of alien species, because that can destroy the native species in a host country. Another target aims at restoring back 30% of the degraded areas to productive ecosystems. That is target 2. Another target aims at bringing DSI into the benefit sharing mechanism. Another target aims at bringing in ecosystem based approach for conserving our resources. And one target wants women to be actively involved in biodiversity conservation. As you know, Biodiversity Act in our country has mandated that women will be part of the biodiversity management committees. So the world wants that biodiversity conservation has to succeed. Then without women it would be very difficult. So at the grassroots level, involving the women and children is very crucial for biodiversity conservation. So, and selected targets are aimed at resource mobilization. how funds can be mobilized, how trainings can be given, how we can actually reduce pesticides. The target says that 50% of the harmful pesticides should be reduced by 2030. Of course, India is already on its way because we have implemented the Central Soil Health Card scheme since 2014, and today more than 230 million soil health cards have been distributed. And these are all initiatives of the Government of India to bring down the amount of harmful fertilizers and pesticides in the soil ecosystem. And in fact, these schemes actually help to improve the yield as well. Experiments have shown that if a farmer is adopting fertilizer application based on the recommendation of the soil health card, in fact the yield increases by 10%, and of course here the cost of cultivation reduces, and the soil health also enhances.
More of an integrated approach.
Yeah, it is an integrated approach because the beneficial microorganisms are left intact with the reduction of harmful chemicals into the soil, and overall the farmer benefits because of higher production and also reduced cost of cultivation. So most of the targets which have been brought under the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, which is already available in the public domain, are acceptable to India, except for 3-4 targets. But again, we are already implementing those targets. Only thing, it is a matter of challenge whether the target fixed by 2030, whether that can be achieved or not. But once this post-2020 GBF is finalized now India will have to prepare the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, where we will decide on which are the targets which can be achieved and how these can be achieved in consultation with other line departments. So overall, I feel that since India is already a leader so far as biodiversity conservation is concerned, in fact, the access and benefit sharing at the COP, the CBD secretary, secretariat, was very happy the way India has implemented the Nagoya Protocol. 72% of the globally issued international recognized certificate of compliance (IRCCs) is from India alone.
Wow.
So India is today issued more than 3,100 IRCCs to companies who have signed agreements with the National Biodiversity Authority and who with a commitment that they will share benefit sharing. So so far as India is concerned, it's already a leader in biodiversity conservation. And with this framework, post-2020 GBF in place, India now has a foundation or a plan of action to move forward to achieve these targets.
Okay, so do you see any other challenges which India might have to adhere to the COP15? Anything in particular?
No, actually, in one target, the Western countries wanted that countries should move towards a nature-based solution.
Yes.
For development, but that was not agreeable for India and other developing countries, because nature-based solution is practical only for developed countries. Say for example, in every sector, if you take nature-based solution, means the developed countries want that the requirement has to be met from what is provided by nature. Say for example, energy sector or the power sector. See, we can generate power through wind energy or solar energy. That is a nature-based solution. But in a country like India, wind-based energy or power-based energy alone would be difficult to take care of the massive population. We are cruising towards 1.4 billion population. So it would be very difficult to rely only on nature-based solutions. So we pushed for ecosystem-based approaches. We wanted that we already have power generating units. We will, without destroying biodiversity, we will take care of our population's power requirement. Similarly, for the infrastructure, connectivity, with the alternate means of connectivity and with minimum diversion, we will try to help the people. So far as India is concerned, because we are a large populated country, we have to balance between environment and development. We have to balance between ecology and economy. Both are important. So the government has its own challenges. So, but by and large, I feel that almost all the targets can be achieved, because the targets have given flexibility for both the developed countries and developing countries to achieve within the target specified under each target. So I do not find any major challenge in any particular target for India not achieving a target. In fact, we are also on the plans for reducing our subsidies in a phased manner. And the post 2020 GBF also says so. Similarly, we have an exclusive agriculture department in all the states, and the Ministry of Agriculture is promoting organic agriculture. We have the Parambara Krishi Vikas Yojana, we have the soil health card scheme. These are all schemes aimed at protecting or preserving the agriculture ecosystems. That is what the COP 2020 GBF also says. Similarly, when nature-based solutions was put forth by developed countries, we asked for ecosystem-based approach. So both have been agreed to.
That's very nice.
Similarly, the invasive alien species introduction to be reduced by 50%. We already have a quarantine department in place to take care of that. So almost all the targets I personally feel that India can achieve and showcase to the world the achievements which we have done already, and what or how we can plan to achieve the targets by 2030 in different ecosystems, agriculture ecosystems, forest ecosystems, water ecosystems, etc.
That is again very heartening to know, sir. So you were even mentioning about resource mobilization. So how does India plan to source funding for biological conservation, biodiversity conservation?
Yeah. So actually, we are implementing this biodiversity finance project. So to ascertain how much funds are required for biodiversity conservation at the national level. So phase 1 of the project, we studied and found that there are 4 broad areas that can provide biodiversity finance for taking care of our biodiversity. One is, of course, the planned budget that is coming from the government. It's a public finance. So every department is getting some funds from the government. So they use the funds for biodiversity conservation. So we evaluated the schemes implemented by the agriculture department, and we found that 114 schemes implemented by the Ministry of Agriculture of the Government of India, if they can mainstream those schemes towards biodiversity conservation, it can go a long way in biodiversity conservation in the agriculture ecosystems.
Oh wow!
But at the same time, at a conservative estimate, the agriculture sector alone requires about $16.5 billion US, whereas from the public finance we are getting close to about $10 billion from the government of India. So there is a gap of $6.5 billion. Similarly, for the forest ecosystem, there is definitely a gap so far as biodiversity conservation is concerned. So to address this gap, India has its own plans. India became a party to the Nagoya Protocol and brought in this access and benefit sharing regulations in 2014. So the National Biodiversity Authority and the State Biodiversity Boards are now implementing the Biological Diversity Act. Under this act, the corporates who are accessing biological resource have to pay up to a maximum of 0.5% of the sale value of the product as benefit sharing. This is plowed back to the villages or to the biodiversity management committees to take care of biodiversity conservation. So the ABS mechanism, that is the access and benefit sharing mechanism, forms a major source of funding for the future to take care of biodiversity conservation. Similarly, we have also the company law of 2013 under which 2% of the profit of companies having high turnover
Okay.
will be channelized for corporate social responsibility. And among the activities that have been earmarked for CSR, corporate social responsibility, biodiversity conservation has also been included. So the companies now have the option to also take care of our biodiversity through the CSR mechanism and the ABS mechanism. So in fact, the users of biodiversity should keep in mind that unless they share a portion of benefit and take care of the biodiversity, in the long run, over extraction of biodiversity may lead to extinction of biological resource. So it is in the interest of both the conservers and the users, the corporate entities, that biodiversity is protected and conserved, for which benefit sharing mechanism is very, very crucial. So these two options are very crucial, and now since the DSI is also brought under the benefit sharing mechanism, there is scope for more funding through the digital sequence information based manufactured products.
Is it? So India will
also be getting more funds from developed countries who are manufacturing products based on DSI technology.
Based on India's biological resources.
So DSI is actually a technology where the nucleotide sequence of a particular resource is actually identified using genetic engineering technology. And with that nucleotide sequence, the companies can make the product, whatever they want, maybe pharmaceutical products or cosmetic products, without physically accessing the resource. But they are obligated to compensate the people who have been using this or conserving these resources for a long time. So that is why this DSA, we have been arguing that DSA should be brought under the benefit sharing mechanism, which has been agreed by the COP. So these are some of the broad areas under which we are planning to mobilize funds, both from the public sector and the private sector. And of course, we are also focusing on technology. See, many times what happens is technology can also be employed for biodiversity conservation. It can actually compensate for the finance requirement. Say, for example, the central soil health card, which was implemented on a countrywide basis. States like Kerala had gone ahead and devised a mobile app based on the data obtained from the central soil health card scheme. Today they have an app, so the farmer can actually download the app and know the manure requirement in his farm instantly, and straight away he can reduce the cost of cultivation by optimum application of manures. So technology also is going a long way to actually filling the gap between the financial requirement and what is actually available for biodiversity conservation.
Very true. I mean, I think after the COVID 2020 scenes, all of us have adopted and adapted to technology more.
Yes.
Okay, so you were also mentioning about high ambition coalition, sir. So how does India plan to achieve the objective of that coalition to bring down 30% of land under sea and sea under conservation? You did mention 27% is already.
Yeah. So we have a tree cover of 24.6% that comprises our reserve forests. We have about 7.14 lakh square kilometers of reserve forests and protected areas that comprises the national parks. I told you about 104 national parks, 566 wildlife sanctuaries, 54 tiger reserves, 33 elephant reserves, 18 biosphere reserves. So these are all designated as protected areas. And then we also have mangroves. We have 75 Ramsar sites. We have a large area brought under eco-sensitive zones. We have today about 36 biodiversity heritage sites. All these put together, we have crossed about 27.2% under area that has been brought under conservation. So the balance area what we are planning is that the feasible option is that a large area is under private sector and public sector, under educational institutions, under companies, both private sector companies and public sector companies, under defense cantonments. They are all very nicely conserved. Lot of greenery is there. They are planted with a lot of trees. So what we are suggesting is, if these areas are also brought under the OECM category, other effective area-based conservation measures. So there is no law binding to these areas. So the ownership will remain with them. They can manage the way they want. But for the purpose of achieving this 30%, we can bring these areas under the OECM. That can comfortably ensure that India crosses the 30% mark. So India joined the High Ambition Coalition last year.
Okay.
This proposal was put forth by France and Costa Rica. And when India joined, there were 54 members. Today there are 117 members. The idea is that if the 30% of the land and 30% of the sea globally, if they are brought under conservation, that would go a long way to mitigate climate change. As you know, biodiversity is not only crucial for the livelihood of the people, but is also very crucial for climate change. Though climate change conference gets a lot of worldwide attention because it immediately people understand that if there is a climate change, I may get affected. But climate change cannot happen without conserving our biodiversity.
Right.
So if climate change has to be mitigated, biodiversity conservation is crucial. So with that objective in mind, only India joined this High Ambition Coalition. And based on our recommendation, this has also been introduced as Target 3 under the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. That certain countries will be landlocked countries. Some countries will be islands. Some countries like India have both seas and land. So if 30% of their area is brought under conservation, globally we can ensure that 30% of the oceans and 30% of the land can be brought under cultivation. That would go a long way for biodiversity conservation in the terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, which indirectly will help in mitigating climate change.
That is nice. So India is now holding the presidency for G20, I suppose. So how does India plan to use that platform to achieve, biodiversity conservation or other aspects?
Yeah. So it is a very, very great honor that India is holding the G20 presidency. So we took it from Indonesia. This presidency is only for 1 year.
Okay.
So if you take G20, it also includes European Union and the United Kingdom. So if you take the countries per se, including the countries associated with the European Union and the United Kingdom, we have 46 countries.
Wow.
It is about 1/4 of the recognized countries of the UN. And these are the most highly economic, very powerful countries. They control more than 75 to 80% of the global economy. So it is a great honor that India is hosting this presidency of the G20 this year from 2023. We are taking over from 1st January 2023. And this is also an ideal opportunity for India to showcase the achievements of India in different sectors. And one sector is the biodiversity sector. See, as I told you earlier, India has done enormously so far as biodiversity conservation is concerned. So, a lot of countries who are participating as part of this G20 conference can learn a lot of good practices, good programs, good projects, good schemes implemented by India, good laws enacted by India. That can be replicated in their countries. So it is an opportunity for India to showcase our achievements and our plans for the future. This is one. Also, India can actually ensure that there is a sharing of technology. See, as you know, for biodiversity conservation, technology is very crucial. And with the technology, we can also reduce the gap in financial requirement for biodiversity conservation. So, a lot of technology is available with this G20 countries.
Okay, yes.
So, if they are convinced that India is doing a lot of work in biodiversity conservation, they can actually share a lot of good technologies with us.
Okay.
That would help our research community and also the various stakeholders for biodiversity conservation. This is number 2. Also, if the G20 countries who are economically rich are convinced that India is doing enormously, extraordinarily well in biodiversity conservation, they will come forward to share a portion of their benefits from DSI,
Okay.
digital sequencing
Yes,
information,
yes.
or other commitments as per the global biodiversity framework, because the post 2020 GBF says that developed countries will have to mobilize close to $200 billion for biodiversity conservation. So, if the G20 countries are happy with our achievements, they can share not only their technologies, because they have a lot of technology with them for biodiversity conservation, they can also contribute financially for biodiversity conservation at the grassroots level. So, in these 3 ways, one is the replication of our good practices in their countries, for sharing their technology with us, and also for sharing for biodiversity finance, for as per the post 2020 GBF. I feel that this G20 presidency, India can actually benefit a lot in the next 1 year out of the G20 presidency, and this will also help the biodiversity sector.
You mean to say it can actually mobilize the resources?
Yes, as per the framework. Yes.
Very nice.
Yes,
Very
yes.
nice. So you were also mentioning about our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Shri Narendra Modi sir's lifestyle mission.
Correct.
So how can that particular mission help us achieve biodiversity conservation?
Excellent. See, the Honorable Prime Minister has brought in this lifestyle mission for environment. In fact, our Honorable Union Minister Shri Yadav-ji, who headed the Indian delegation at COP15 in Montreal, in his brief speech articulated the vision of our Honorable Prime Minister on how our lifestyle can actually help in environment. So this lifestyle mission for environment was actually picked up by the COP. And this is also a major outcome. This was brought as one of the target.
Okay.
To reduce consumption. As I told you earlier, most of the biodiversity rich areas have been destroyed over the years with the purpose of producing more to cater to the growing population. So the idea of this lifestyle mission is that if the citizens across the world can actually minimize their consumption to their actual requirement, indirectly it can actually protect our environment and biodiversity. So there will not be a need to go and extract large amount of biological resources or to destroy an environment for the sake of producing more. So the COP15 also took the suggestion of our Honorable Prime Minister that there should be lifestyle changes among the citizens to ensure that there is a 50% reduction in the consumption. That would go a long way for biodiversity conservation, both directly and indirectly.
So this is for all of us, the citizens, to take up and do our bit for biological diversity conservation. So now that COP15 is over, you have given us very valuable inputs about your own experiences. So what is way forward for India from here?
Now, since already India is doing a lot of activities for biodiversity conservation, now we have a framework, foundation to tell the world that these are the things we have done, and then from now on for the next 10 years, what we are planning to do. So the immediate task is to prepare the national biodiversity strategy and action plan by consulting various line ministries on how to achieve the targets by 2030, and then of course the CBD secretary will also be reviewing what countries are doing on the various targets. We will have to also submit our report. So all our activities should be mainstreamed. We should align our activities and programs with the post 2020 GBF. that would send a larger message to the world that we are taking care of our biodiversity and we are also contributing to mitigating climate change.
That's great. So, thank you so much for the insightful session, sir. We had a great time knowing all the information that you have gathered at a global level. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Divya. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.